You didn't see it coming. Not like this. One sentence from his mother and everything you thought was solid just cracked wide open. We had to separate Blake from you. Because of you. 3 seconds. That's all it took. And suddenly you're standing there wondering if any of it was ever real. Blake Shelton's mama said those words, Miranda. Not yelling, not crying, just calm, direct, cold. And here's the thing about family drama nobody warns you about. The loudest damage doesn't come from screaming. It comes from the quiet ones. The ones who smile at dinner and then pull the rug out when you're not looking. You felt it before she even opened her mouth. That heaviness in the air, like something was about to shift and you couldn't stop it. Blake was sitting right there, right next to you, but it felt like he was 1,000 miles away. He wasn't looking at you the same anymore, and you knew. Deep down you knew something had been said. Something had been planted in his head, but what? You kept replaying every moment, every conversation, every laugh, trying to find the mistake, trying to figure out what you did wrong. But nothing made sense, because here's the truth, you didn't do anything wrong. But when someone blames you without explanation, your brain doesn't care. It starts searching anyway. And that's exactly what they want. They want you confused. They want you second-guessing. Because confused people don't fight back. This wasn't just about Blake. This was about control. About a mother who couldn't let go. About a man who couldn't stand up. And about you, caught in the middle of a story that was written long before you ever showed up. And if you've ever been blamed for something you know you didn't do, then you already feel this in your chest right now. It started small. It always does. Little glances across the table, conversations that stopped the second you walked into the room. You told yourself it was nothing. You laughed it off. But then Blake started changing. Not all at once, just different. Like someone whispered something into his world and now everything about you looked wrong in his eyes. You asked him once, "Did I do something?" He said no, but his eyes said yes. Days turned into weeks. Every time you tried to bring it up, it slipped away. Nothing's wrong. It's just stress. You're overthinking. That last one hurt the most, because you weren't overthinking. You were watching your relationship dissolve in real time, and nobody would tell you why. And then came that moment. Miranda looked you dead in the face and said it. We had to separate Blake from you, because of you. No explanation, no softness, just that. And it didn't just hurt. It confused you. Because what did that even mean? Because of you? How? What did you do? Your mind started racing, every memory replaying like a broken loop, trying to find the moment it all went wrong. But here's what you didn't know yet. This had nothing to do with you. This was about her, about a mother who saw you as a threat. Not because you were bad for Blake, but because you were good for him. And that scared her. Because when someone starts growing, when they start choosing their own path, the people who need control, they panic. And panic makes people do cruel things. Blake just stood there, quiet, not defending you, not explaining, just there. And that silence from him hurt more than her words. Because if anyone should have known you, it was him. Right? You looked at him, hoping, waiting, just for something, a word, a sign, anything. But he looked away, and in that moment you felt it. Not just distance, not confusion, but loss. The kind that doesn't happen all at once, but in slow, quiet pieces. You started asking yourself questions you never thought you would. Was any of it real? Did he ever really choose me? Or was I just temporary? And that's when the doubt creeps in, not just about him, but about yourself. Because when someone says, because of you, it sticks. Even when you don't understand it. Even when it's not true, you carry it. Into your thoughts, into your nights, into every quiet moment where your mind won't stop. And here's the part nobody tells you. Sometimes people don't separate you because you did something wrong. Sometimes they separate you because they can't control what you represent. Because you challenge something. Because you don't fit into a story they've already decided. Gwen Stefani knows this. She lived it. Before Blake. Before the happiness. She was in a marriage that looked perfect on the outside. But behind closed doors, it was falling apart. And when it ended, people had opinions. People had stories. People decided who was to blame. But the truth? The truth was buried under years of silence. And by the time she finally spoke, most people had already made up their minds. That's what happens when someone else controls the narrative. They get to decide who you are before you even get a chance to speak. And right now you're stuck in that same place. That sentence, that look, that silence. It keeps replaying over and over again. But something else is happening too. Something quieter. Something deeper. A question you haven't fully faced yet. What if this wasn't just about them? What if this moment is actually about you and what you choose next? That's where everything changes. But before that, there's something you still don't know. Something Miranda didn't say. Something Blake didn't explain. And when you finally find out what it is, it won't just hurt. It'll change the way you see everything that happened before. Blake's career was built on heartbreak. Every song, every lyric, every note came from something real, and the world loved him for it. But here's the thing about heartbreak. It doesn't just live in songs. It lives in kitchens, in quiet cars, in moments where someone you love chooses silence over you.
This is Tuesday night, I'm bowling. If you got
Kelly Clarkson once said in an interview that the hardest part of her divorce wasn't the ending. It was realizing how long she'd been making excuses for someone who wasn't fighting for her. She said she kept telling herself, he's just stressed, or he's just going through something. But deep down, she knew. And that's exactly where you are right now, you know? You've known for a while, you just didn't want to believe it. Because believing it means accepting that the person you loved didn't love you enough to stand up. Miranda didn't separate you from Blake to protect him. She separated you from Blake to keep him small, to keep him hers, to make sure nobody ever came between her version of his life and the reality he was starting to build with you. And Blake, he let it happen. Not because you weren't enough, but because he wasn't strong enough. And that realization stings, but it also frees you. Because suddenly, you're not searching for your mistake anymore. You're not replaying every memory trying to fix something that was never yours to fix. You're seeing it for what it is. And that clarity, it's powerful. But it's also uncomfortable, because now there's a new question. If it wasn't your fault, then why does it still hurt so much? And the answer is simple. Because you cared. Because it mattered. Because you gave something real to a situation that wasn't built to hold it. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you honest.
I need you.
But here's where it gets crazy. You're about to find out what Blake's mama really meant. And when you do, it's gonna flip everything. It didn't happen all at once. The truth rarely does. It comes in pieces, small ones. The kind you almost ignore until they start connecting. And then one day you're standing in your kitchen, staring at your phone, and everything finally makes sense. At first it was just a message. Short, simple, almost careless. You deserve someone better. That's what Blake sent. And for a second it felt like concern, like maybe he was thinking about you. But something about it felt off. Because when someone suddenly decides you deserve better, it usually means they've already stepped away, and they just don't want to say why. You stared at that message longer than you should have, reading it again and again, trying to hear what wasn't written. And then it hit you. That wasn't his voice. Not really. That was something he had been told, something he had accepted, without questioning it. And suddenly, everything started to make sense. The distance, the silence, the shift in his eyes. It wasn't random. It was influenced, shaped, directed. And the hardest part? He didn't even realize it. Or maybe he did. But it was easier not to fight it. Because standing up, especially against family, that takes something most people don't have. And you began to see it clearly now. This wasn't just about you. This was about control, about expectations, about a version of Blake's life that didn't include you. And instead of explaining it, they rewrote the story. They made you the reason. Because of you. 3 words. That carry blame without proof. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You think back to every moment Miranda spoke to you. Every look. Every pause. And now it's clear. She had already decided. Before you even had a chance. And Blake, he followed. Not because you weren't enough, but because he wasn't strong enough. And that realization stings. But it also frees you. Because suddenly you're not searching for your mistake anymore. You're seeing it for what it is. And that clarity? It's powerful. But it's also uncomfortable. Because now there's a new question. If it wasn't your fault, then why does it still hurt so much? And the answer's simple. Because you cared. Because it mattered. Because you gave something real to a situation that wasn't built to hold it. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you honest. But here's where everything shifts. Because now you get to choose. Not them, not Blake, not Miranda, you. Blake Shelton and Gwen Stefani didn't find each other in a fairy tale moment. They found each other in the wreckage. Both coming out of relationships that broke them. Both carrying blame they didn't deserve. Both trying to figure out who they were when everything they thought was solid turned out to be sand. And when they finally got together, the world had opinions. People said it was too fast. People said it wouldn't last. People said Gwen was just a rebound. But they didn't care. Because for the first time in years, they weren't living for someone else's approval. That's what happens when you finally stop carrying other people's words. You start hearing your own voice again. And that voice? It's been trying to tell you something this whole time. You didn't lose something real. You lost something that couldn't stand on its own. And there's a difference, a big one, because real things fight to stay. They don't disappear in silence. They don't let others decide their fate. And Blake, he didn't fight. And that tells you everything you need to know. But here's the twist, the part no one expects. One day he will think about it, about you, about what happened, and he'll start asking questions he avoided before. He'll remember the way things felt before everything got complicated, and for a moment he'll wonder, what if I handled it differently? But by then you won't be the same person, because moments like this, they change you. They teach you things you can't unlearn. They show you what love should feel like and what it shouldn't. And most importantly, they show you your own worth. Not the version someone else defines, but the one you discover when everything else falls away. And that version of you, it doesn't chase explanations. It doesn't beg for clarity. It doesn't accept blame without truth.
For only you and God to hear when you love someone that says.
Walks away. Not loudly, not angrily, but confidently. Because it understands something now that you didn't before. You were never the problem. You were just in the wrong place with people who couldn't see your value. Kelly Clarkson said something once that stuck with a lot of people. She said the moment she realized she was worth more than the fight was the moment she stopped fighting for people who weren't fighting for her. And that shift, that's when her life actually started. And once you see that, really see it, everything changes. The pain doesn't disappear overnight, but it transforms. It becomes something else, something stronger, something that builds you instead of breaking you. You walked into the kitchen one morning and heard her laugh. Blake's mama, the second she saw you, her face went flat. Blake suddenly got interested in his phone, and no one said a word, but you heard everything. That's when you knew. Not from what was said, but from what wasn't. And that moment taught you more about people than 100 conversations ever could. Gwen Stefani didn't wait for an apology from the people who doubted her. She didn't need their validation. She built her own life, her own happiness, her own version of what love should look like. And the people who couldn't see her worth, they became background noise.
Thing that ever happened to you.
And one day you'll look back at that moment, that sentence. That's why we separated Blake from you, because of you. And instead of feeling hurt, you'll feel clarity. Because you'll finally understand it was never about you. It was about their fear, their need for control, their inability to let go. And the moment you stop believing their version is the moment you take your power back. Blake will call one day. Not to apologize, not to explain. He'll call to ask if you still have his jacket at your place. His jacket, that's what he'll call about. And in that one ridiculous, almost laughable moment, you'll finally understand. You weren't grieving a relationship. You were grieving an illusion. And illusions were always meant to break. So no, you didn't see it coming. Not like this. But maybe that's exactly how it needed to happen. Because if you had seen it coming, you would have stayed. You would have fought for something that was never fighting for you. So no, you didn't see it coming. But now you see everything. And you will never unsee it again. And that right there, that's not the end of your story. That's where your real story be.